I spent months planning Kyle's 10th birthday, battling exhaustion to give him a perfect day. But the moment the candles were lit, my sister Isabella stood up, shoved my son aside, and produced a cake for her daughter, whose birthday wasn't for weeks. Kyle was crushed. I didn't scream. I didn't fight. I just walked out and prepared an eviction notice for the luxury apartment I'd been paying for. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens next. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The betrayal was worse than the diagnosis itself. That sounds dramatic, I know, but when you are standing in the wreckage of a moment you spent 6 months building, clutching the hand of a sobbing 10-year-old boy, dramatic feels like an understatement. It feels like the only word that fits. To understand why I did what I did, you have to understand the state I was in. 2 months prior to Kyle's 10th birthday, I had been hospitalized with a severe case of pneumonia that had nearly turned septic. I am a strong woman. I'm a property asset manager for a commercial real estate firm, a job that requires a spine of steel and the ability to put out fires quite literally and figuratively. But this illness had leveled me. It had stripped me of my energy, my focus, and my physical strength. For weeks, I could barely walk from the bedroom to the kitchen without needing to sit down, my lungs burning like they were filled with broken glass. But Kyle was turning 10, double digits. It was the first major milestone since his father, my ex-husband, had moved 3 states away and largely checked out of our daily lives. I needed this day to be perfect for him. I needed him to feel seen, celebrated, and centered. So, against my doctor's orders to rest, and against the screaming protests of my own fatigue, I planned the perfect party. It was at a local arcade and pizza place, classic, loud, and exactly what a 10-year-old boy wants. I had booked the private room. I had ordered the custom decorations with his favorite video game characters. I had saved up to buy him the specific gaming console he had been talking about for a year. Every detail was paid for with money I had earned through overtime, working late nights even while recovering, just to ensure my budget could handle the party and the family obligations I was burdened with. The day of the party, I was running on adrenaline and cough suppressant. I arrived early to set up, my hands trembling slightly as I arranged the gift bags. My mother, Barbara, and my younger sister, Isabella, arrived 45 minutes late. When they walked in, the dynamic shifted instantly. Isabella, at 32, was beautiful in a high-maintenance way that required significant funding that usually came from me. She was wearing a designer dress I'm fairly certain I had paid for indirectly, and she was dragging her daughter, Lily, who was 6. Barbara followed behind them, carrying nothing, looking around the arcade with a distinct air of disapproval, as if the joy of children was a personal affront to her sensory sensitivities. "Jane, it's so loud in here," Barbara complained before even saying hello to the birthday boy. "Isabella has a headache. You know she didn't sleep well last night." "I'm sorry, Mom," I said, forcing a smile and smoothing down Kyle's hair. "But the kids are having fun. Hi, Isabella. Hi, Lily." Isabella barely acknowledged me. She was on her phone, likely updating her social media stories. She fancied herself an influencer, which mostly meant she posted photos of a lifestyle she couldn't afford and waited for likes that didn't pay the bills. The party proceeded. Kyle was happy. That was all that mattered. He played games, he ate pizza, he laughed with his friends. I sat in the corner, sipping water, feeling the exhaustion tugging at my eyelids, but my heart was full. I had done it. I had pulled it off. Then came the cake. I had ordered a custom cake for Kyle, a chocolate masterpiece shaped like a controller. I gathered all the kids around the table. The lights were dimmed. The employees brought the cake out with candles blazing. I started singing "Happy Birthday," my voice raspy but loud, and the other parents and kids joined in. Kyle's face was glowing. He looked at the cake, then up at me, his eyes wide with pure joy. He took a deep breath, ready to blow out the candles. Suddenly, Isabella stood up. She didn't just stand, she commanded the room. She clapped her hands sharply, cutting through the singing. Wait just a second, everyone," she announced, her voice projecting with a clarity I envied. The singing trailed off. The room went silent. Kyle froze, his breath hitched in his chest, looking confused. Isabella smiled, a bright, predatory expression that I knew too well. "While everyone is here," she said, gesturing to the gathered crowd of Kyle's friends and their parents, "we should be efficient with our celebration. Lily's birthday is in 2 weeks, and since we're all family and friends here, let's sing for Lily too." I blinked, I thought I had misheard. 2 weeks. Before I could react, Isabella reached under the table and pulled out a box she had brought in secretly. She opened it to reveal a pink, glittery cake, slightly smaller than Kyle's but flashy enough to draw the eye. She shoved Kyle's expensive custom cake to the side, physically sliding it so hard that one of the candles toppled over onto the tablecloth and placed Lily's cake in the center. "Come on, Lily," Isabella cheered, pulling her confused daughter forward. "Let's practice for your big day. Mommy bought you a cake." Then Isabella started singing "Happy Birthday" to Lily. Barbara, without missing a beat, joined in, clapping loudly and beaming at her granddaughter. Kyle stood there. He was 10 years old. He was old enough to understand exactly what was happening. He looked at his cake, shoved to the side like garbage. He looked at his grandmother, singing for his cousin on his day. He looked at me, his eyes filling with tears of humiliation. He didn't say a word. He just stared at the floor, his shoulders slumping in a way that broke something permanent inside of me. The room was excruciatingly awkward. The other parents exchanged horrified glances. The other kids looked confused. I felt a coldness spread through my chest that had nothing to do with my pneumonia. It was a clarity, a freezing, absolute clarity. I didn't scream. I didn't make a scene. I didn't try to shout over Isabella's screeching rendition of the birthday song. I walked over to the table. I blew out the candles on Kyle's cake so they wouldn't burn the table. Then I reached out and took Kyle's hand. "Mom," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Grab your new game," I said softly. "We're leaving." "But the cake." "We'll get a better one, a real one, just us." I grabbed the gift bags from the side table. Isabella was still singing, eyes closed, swaying, completely absorbed in the moment she had stolen. Barbara noticed me moving and frowned, pausing her singing. "Jane, where are you going? We haven't cut the cake yet," Barbara said, her tone admonishing. I didn't look at her. I guided Kyle toward the door. "Jane," Isabella called out, finally opening her eyes. "Don't be rude, we're celebrating the family." I stopped at the door. The arcade noises seemed distant, muffled by the pounding of my own heart. I turned just enough to see them, Isabella looking indignant, Barbara looking disappointed, the pink cake sitting in the spotlight where my son should have been. I turned back to the door and pushed it open. The fresh air hit my face, but it didn't cool the fire that had just ignited in my soul. We got in the car. I buckled Kyle in. He was silent, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. I started the engine, my grip on the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. We drove in silence for 10 minutes before I pulled into the driveway of our modest home. I turned off the car. My phone buzzed. It was a text from my mother. "You are so dramatic. You ruined the vibe. You better apologize to your sister. Also, are you still paying for their rent this month? Isabella says the landlord sent a notice about a late fee." I stared at the screen. The audacity was breathtaking. It was almost impressive in its monstrosity. I typed back 2 sentences. "Rent? Oh, I thought we were singing for Lily now." I hit send. And then, for the first time in my life, I turned off my phone. But as I looked at my son walking sadly to the front door, I knew that turning off the phone wasn't enough. They had humiliated my son. They had taken my kindness and weaponized it against the person I loved most in the world. They thought I was just the bank. They thought I was just the fixer. They had forgotten one crucial thing about my job. I don't just manage properties, I manage evictions, and I was about to file the biggest one of my life. The drive to the grocery store an hour later was a blur of red traffic lights and unshed tears. I had promised Kyle a better one, and I intended to keep that promise, even if I had to bake it myself from scratch at midnight. But first, we stopped at an upscale bakery that I usually avoided due to the price. I bought the most decadent chocolate ganache cake they had, a 10 candle, and a sparkling cider. When we got home, the silence in the house was heavy. It wasn't a peaceful silence. It was the suffocating quiet of a child who feels unimportant. Kyle sat on the sofa, the unopened box of his new gaming console on his lap, staring blankly at the TV, which wasn't even turned on. "Kyle," I asked softly, placing the bakery box on the coffee table. He looked up, his eyes were red-rimmed. "Why does Grandma like Lily more than me?" Question hit me like a physical blow. It was the question I had spent 5 years trying to shield him from, the question I had covered up with extra presents, excuses about Grandma being tired, and lies about Isabella being stressed. I sat down next to him and pulled him into a hug. He was getting so big, but he folded into my arms like a toddler. Grandma has a hard time seeing things clearly sometimes," I lied, trying to find a middle ground between honesty and protecting him from bitterness. "But that is not about you. You are amazing. You are smart and kind, and you are the best thing in my life." "They didn't even sing for me, Mom," he whispered into my shoulder. "Isabella pushed my cake." "I know," I said, my voice hardening involuntarily. "And I am so sorry I let that happen. I promise you, Kyle, it will never happen again." I meant it. This wasn't just a comforting platitude. It was a vow. We ate the expensive cake for dinner. We played his new video game until midnight. I laughed with him, I cheered for him, and I watched the light slowly return to his eyes. But while my face was smiling for my son, my mind was operating on a completely different track. It was cold, calculating, and dissecting the last 5 years of my financial life. Once Kyle was asleep, I went into my home office. I didn't turn on the overhead light, just the small desk lamp. I opened my laptop and logged into my bank accounts. The numbers glared back at me. For the last 18 months, I had been hemorrhaging money to support Isabella. It started when her husband, a boyfriend she swore was the one, left her with nothing. She had come to me crying, holding Lily, claiming they were going to be on the streets. Barbara had called me, weeping, saying, "Jane, you have a good job, you have a house. You can't let your sister be homeless." So I stepped in. I used my connections in the industry to get Isabella into a luxury condo complex that my firm managed. It was a beautiful 2-bedroom unit in a high-end building downtown, way nicer than the suburban bungalow I lived in. I got her a friends and family rate, but the rent was still steep. The agreement was simple. I would sign the lease as the primary tenant because Isabella had no credit. I would pay the rent for a few months until she got on her feet. She was supposed to pay for utilities and eventually take over the lease. 18 months later, I was paying the rent, the utilities, her phone bill, and occasionally her car insurance. Every time I brought it up, Barbara would guilt-trip me, or Isabella would have some new crisis. A sick cat, a broken car, a sudden opportunity for her career that required capital. I pulled up the lease agreement on my screen. There it was, tenant Jane Miller, occupant Isabella Miller. My name, my credit score, my liability. But also, my control. I looked at the text messages on my phone, which I had finally turned back on. A barrage of notifications flooded in. "Barbara, 8:30 p.m., why aren't you answering? Isabella is crying. You embarrassed her in front of her followers. She was live streaming." "Isabella, 9:15 p.m., you are so selfish. I try to include Lily so she doesn't feel left out and you act like a psycho. Also, I need $200 for groceries. The party stress made me forget to shop." "Barbara, 9:45 p.m., Jane, answer me. The rent check needs to clear by the 1st. Don't play games with your sister's housing." I stared at the messages. They really believed this dynamic was permanent. They believed that no matter how badly they treated me or how cruelly they treated my son, the check would always clear. They thought I was trapped by obligation, by the blood bond, by the fear of being the bad daughter. They didn't realize that by pushing Kyle aside, they had severed the only cord that was keeping my wallet open. I opened a new document on my computer. I didn't type a reply to their texts. Instead, I began drafting a formal letter. It wasn't a text, it was a legal notice. To the management office, internal memo from Jane Miller, asset manager Ray. Lease termination and notice to vacate for Unit 4B. I paused, my finger hovering over the keyboard. If I did this, it was nuclear war. Barbara would never forgive me. Isabella would weaponize every family member we had against me. Then I looked at the photo on my desk. It was from earlier that day, taken before the guests arrived. Kyle standing next to his controller cake, grinning. I remembered the look on his face when Isabella shoved that cake aside. I started typing again. I wasn't just going to stop paying. That would be too slow. If I simply stopped paying, the eviction process for non-payment would take months, and it would ruin my credit since my name was on the lease. No, I had to be smarter. I remembered a clause in the lease agreement for this specific building. It was a clause I had written into the standard contracts myself 3 years ago. Our owner-employee occupied units. It allowed the leaseholder to terminate the tenancy with only 14 days' notice if the unit was being repurposed for immediate owner use, or if the employment status changed. Technically, I wasn't firing myself, but I could certainly repurpose the unit. I deleted the draft. I needed to be more precise. I needed to check the exact wording of the permitted occupants section. They thought I was just a sister they could bully, but they had forgotten one crucial thing. I wasn't just the sister paying the rent, I was the landlord. The next morning was a Sunday. Normally, Sundays were reserved for family dinner at Barbara's house. This was a ritual I had dreaded for years but attended religiously. It was an event where I would buy the groceries, cook the food, wash the dishes, and listen to Barbara praise Isabella for simply existing. I woke up early, feeling a strange sense of lightness despite the heavy situation. It was the lightness of dropping a burden I hadn't realized I was carrying. I walked into the kitchen and made pancakes for Kyle. When he woke up, he was cautious, gauging my mood. "Are we going to Grandma's today?" he asked, poking at a pancake. "No," I said firmly. "We are going to the park, then we are going to the movies, just us." Relief washed over his face. Good, I didn't want to see Isabella. "You don't have to," I promised. While Kyle got dressed, I sat with my coffee and let the memories of the financial abuse wash over me, fueling my resolve. It wasn't just the rent. 3 years ago, when I was saving for a down payment on a bigger house so Kyle could have a backyard, Isabella had totaled her car. She had been driving drunk, a fact Barbara hushed up immediately. I drained my savings to pay for her legal fees and get her a new, safe car for the baby. That set me back 2 years on my house goal. Last year, when Kyle needed braces, Barbara told me I was being vain and that his teeth were fine. The very next week, she demanded I pay for Isabella's dental veneers because Isabella wanted to get into modeling. I refused that time, and Barbara didn't speak to me for a month, telling the aunts that I was jealous of Isabella's beauty. Isabella was the golden child. She was charismatic, bubbly, and utterly incapable of taking responsibility for her life. She viewed people as resources. Men were wallets, family members were safety nets. She had never held a job for longer than 6 months. Her profession, as an influencer, was a joke. She had maybe 2,000 followers, most of them bots, yet she insisted on living like a celebrity. And Barbara was the architect of this disaster. My father had passed away 10 years ago, and since then, Barbara had decided that her job was to protect Isabella from the harsh realities of the world, using me as the shield. My phone rang. It was Barbara. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again, then Isabella called, then Barbara again. Finally, around 10:00 a.m., the landline rang. I hadn't unplugged it. Kyle looked up from his game, startled. I picked it up. Hello. Jane, Barbara's voice screeched. Are you insane? Why aren't you here? I've been waiting for you to bring the roast for 2 hours. I'm not coming, Mom, I said calmly. What do you mean you're not coming? It's Sunday. Kyle and I are spending the day together, alone. Oh, stop this childishness, Barbara snapped. Isabella is crying her eyes out. She feels terrible that you misunderstood her yesterday. She was just trying to be inclusive. You need to come here and apologize for storming out and traumatizing Lily. I traumatized Lily, I laughed, a dry, humorless sound. Isabella pushed my son's cake off the table, Mom. It was an accident. She was excited. Now get over here and bring the check. Isabella needs to pay the rent tomorrow or they'll charge a late fee. There is no check, Mom. Silence, a long, heavy silence. Excuse me, Barbara's voice dropped an octave. What did you say? I said there is no check. I'm not paying Isabella's rent this month, or next month, or ever again. You can't do that, Barbara hissed. You promised, you signed the papers. She can't afford that place on her own. She has a child. So do I said. And my child needs a mother who respects him enough to stop funding the people who bully him. If you don't pay that rent, Barbara threatened, Isabella will be evicted. They will kick her out on the street. Do you want your niece on the street? She won't be on the street, Mom. She can live with you. You have a 4-bedroom house. I can't have a child living here. My nerves, Barbara sputtered. This was classic Barbara. She loved her grandchildren as props, but she didn't want the daily work of them. Well, that sounds like a problem for you and Isabella to solve. I'm done. I hung up the phone. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from adrenaline. I knew what was coming next. They wouldn't believe me. They would think I was bluffing. They would think I would cave in a few days when the guilt set in. But they didn't know I had already logged into the company portal. I hadn't just decided to stop paying. I had flagged the account for Unit 4B. The antagonist in my story wasn't just a selfish sister. It was a system. A system of 2 women who had fed off me for a decade. And to break a system, you don't just remove the fuel. You have to dismantle the machinery. I looked at the calendar. It was the 14th of the month. Rent was due on the 1st. They had 2 weeks. But I wasn't going to wait for the 1st. I was going to accelerate the timeline. Monday morning, I walked into my office with a purpose I hadn't felt in years. My assistant, Sarah, looked at me with concern. Jane, you look intense. Are you feeling okay, the pneumonia? I'm fine, Sarah, I said, setting down my bag. In fact, I've never been better. I need you to pull the file for the Skyline Plaza, Unit 4B. Sarah raised an eyebrow. She knew that was my sister's unit. Is everything okay with the lease? We need to review the occupancy terms. Specifically, the unauthorized subletting clause and the guarantor requirements. I spent the morning dissecting the legal document I had signed. As I suspected, the lease was entirely in my name. Isabella was listed as an authorized occupant, but not a financial party. This meant I held 100% of the liability, but it also meant I held 100% of the rights to the unit. Technically, I could surrender the apartment. If I surrendered the unit, the authorized occupant had no legal standing to remain. They would be trespassing. However, there was a snag. If I broke the lease early, there was a penalty fee of 2 months' rent, about $6,000. I could afford it, but it would hurt. I didn't want to pay to get rid of her. I wanted her to leave on her own, or for the company to remove her for cause. Then I found it. Clause 17, Conduct and Community Standards. Tenants and occupants shall not engage in commercial activity within the residential unit without prior written consent. Isabella was an influencer. I knew for a fact she was filming product reviews and lifestyle coaching sessions in the apartment. She had even tagged the building location in her posts to seem fancy. Technically, she was running an unregistered business from the unit. But that was weak. I needed something stronger. I decided to do something I should have done a year ago. I requested the access log for the unit. As the leaseholder, I had the right to see when the key fobs were used. I scrolled through the data. The pattern was strange. Isabella's fob was used at normal times, but there was a second fob, the guest fob I had given her for Barbara or babysitters. The guest fob was being used every single night between 1:00 a.m. and 4:00 a.m. It was entering and leaving multiple times. Suspicion prickled at the back of my neck. Was she dating someone? I called the concierge at the building, a man named Mike who I had hired years ago. "Hey Mike, it's Jane Miller. Quick question about 4B, have there been any noise complaints?" Mike hesitated. Honestly, Ms. Miller, yes, we haven't sent formal notices because, well, it's your sister. But the neighbors on 4A and 4C have complained about loud music and traffic, lots of people coming in and out late at night. Traffic? Yeah, like parties, or maybe clients, I don't know, different guys. My stomach turned. Why didn't you tell me? We didn't want to cause family trouble, Mike said apologetically. Mike, treat 4B like any other unit from now on. Send me the incident reports. You got it. 5 minutes later, my inbox pinged. 3 incident reports in the last month alone. Loud music. Cannabis smell, strictly prohibited. Altercations in the hallway. This was it. This was the leverage. I wasn't just a sister being mean. I was a liable tenant whose occupant was violating the lease and damaging the property's reputation. I printed the reports. I put them in a folder. Then I drafted the email to Isabella. Subject: immediate surrender of Unit 4B. Isabella, due to multiple lease violations, attached and failure to pay rent, I am terminating the lease for Unit 4B effective immediately. I have submitted a notice to vacate to management. You have 30 days to vacate the premises. If you do not leave by date, legal eviction proceedings will begin, which will go on your permanent public record. This is not a negotiation. Jane. I hit send. The response was immediate. My phone blew up, but this time I didn't ignore it. I picked up when Isabella called. You can't do this, she screamed. You're lying. What violations? I'm a perfect tenant. I have the reports, Isabella, I said, my voice steady. The noise, the smoke, the men coming in and out at 3 a.m. Mike sent me everything. Mike is a liar. He's jealous. It's over, Isabella. Start packing. You have 30 days. I'm not going anywhere, she shrieked. Mom said you have to pay. You can't kick a single mother out. Watch me, I said. And Isabella, if you damage 1 inch of that apartment before you leave, I will sue you for the repairs. I will garnish whatever pitiful wages you make from your sponsorships until I am paid back. I hung up. I felt a surge of power, but I knew the war wasn't over. Barbara was the final boss, and she was about to enter the chat. That evening, the doorbell rang. I checked the camera. It was Barbara. She looked furious. I told Kyle to put his headphones on and stay in his room. I opened the door. Barbara stormed in without waiting for an invitation. How dare you, she spat. How dare you threaten your sister like that? Eviction, legal records. Jane, have you lost your mind? She is family. She is a liability, I said, crossing my arms. And she humiliated my son. Oh, get over the damn cake. Barbara waved her hand dismissively. Kyle is fine. He's a boy. He doesn't care about cakes. You are using that as an excuse to be cruel because you're jealous of Isabella's freedom. Jealous? I laughed, genuinely amused. Mom, I pay for her freedom, or I did, until yesterday. You have plenty of money, Barbara yelled. You have this house, you have that fancy job. Why can't you just help her? What is wrong with you? What is wrong with me is that I woke up, I said, stepping closer to her. I realized that you don't see me as a daughter. You see me as an ATM. You see me as the mule that carries Isabella's baggage. That is not true. I love you equally. Really? When was the last time you came to my house just to see me? When was the last time you bought Kyle a gift that wasn't a re-gift from something Isabella didn't want? When was the last time you defended me? Barbara faltered, her face flushing. I defend you all the time. A liar. The word hung in the air. I had never called my mother a liar before. I'm giving her 30 days, I repeated. That is generous. If it were any other tenant with those noise complaints and drug violations, I'd have them out in 3 days. She should be thanking me. She's not leaving, Barbara said, her eyes narrowing. She told me she's not leaving. She's going to squat. And if you try to force her out, she'll tell everyone on social media that her rich sister is making her homeless. Let her, I said. Let her post it. And then I'll post the receipts of every rent check I've written for the last 2 years. I'll post the lease agreement. I'll post the police reports for the noise complaints. Barbara paled. She cared about appearances more than anything. You wouldn't. Try me. If you do this, Barbara hissed, pointing a finger at me, you are out of this family. I will not speak to you. The aunts will not speak to you. You will be alone. I looked at my mother. I looked at the woman who had watched my son cry yesterday and didn't even put down her fork. Mom, I said softly, I've been alone in this family for years. I just stopped paying for the privilege. I opened the door. Get out. Barbara stared at me, shocked by my steel. She huffed, turned on her heel, and marched out. You'll regret this, she screamed from the driveway. I closed the door and locked it. My hands were shaking again, but this time it was relief. The next 2 weeks were a siege. Isabella didn't pack. Instead, she dug in. She posted vague, tearful videos on TikTok about toxic family members and abusive siblings without naming me directly, but dropping enough hints that our mutual acquaintances knew who she meant. She painted herself as a martyr, a struggling single mom being targeted by a jealous, corporate monster. Barbara launched a smear campaign with the extended family. I got calls from Aunt Carol and Cousin Mike telling me I was being heartless and that family helps family. I didn't argue with them. I simply emailed them a PDF document I had compiled. I called it the ledger. It contained a spreadsheet of every dollar I had given Isabella in 5 years total, $48,000. The incident reports from the condo, drug use, fighting. A photo of Kyle's ruined birthday cake with a brief description of the incident. One by one, the flying monkeys went silent. Aunt Carol texted back, "Oh my God, I had no idea it was this much money." Cousin Mike called and apologized, saying Isabella had told him I stole her inheritance, which didn't exist. But Isabella still wasn't leaving. The 30-day deadline was approaching, and Mike the concierge told me she had changed the locks on the door, a direct violation of the lease. She was escalating. She thought that if she made it impossible for me to enter, I would give up. She thought the legal system was too slow to catch her. She was wrong. I called my lawyer, David, a shark who specialized in landlord-tenant disputes. S.A. changed the locks, David asked on the phone. Yes. Perfect, David said. That's an emergency violation. We don't need to wait 30 days. We can file for an emergency entry order to inspect the property for safety. If she refuses, we get the sheriff. Do it, I said. Also, David added, since the lease is in your name, you can technically cut the utilities. You aren't the landlord legally, the building owner is. You are the tenant. You have no obligation to provide electricity to a squatter in your unit. I hesitated. Cutting the power seemed cruel. Lily was there. I won't cut the power, I said, but I will cancel the internet. Isabella's entire life, her influencer, career, her Netflix, her connection to her echo chamber, relied on the high-speed fiber optic internet I paid for. I logged into the provider's website, cancel service, effective immediately. 3 hours later, my phone rang. It was Isabella. UB*TCH, she screamed. The Wi-Fi is down. I was in the middle of a live stream. Pay for it yourself, I said. Put it in your name. Oh wait, you can't. You have a credit score of 400. I hate you. I hope you die. Pack your bags, Isabella. The sheriff is coming on Friday to inspect the locks. You're bluffing. I never bluff, not anymore. Friday arrived, the deadline. I pulled up to the condo building. I wasn't alone. I had brought a sheriff's deputy and 2 movers. I also brought a locksmith. Barbara's car was in the driveway. I knew she would be there, acting as a human shield. We went up to the 4th floor. The deputy knocked on the door. Sheriff's Department, open up. Silence. We have a warrant to inspect the premises for lease violations, the deputy announced. Open the door or we will drill the lock. The door swung open. Barbara stood there, her face purple with rage. This is harassment, she shouted. My daughter is sick, she can't be disturbed. Ma'am, step aside, the deputy said calmly. I walked in past Barbara. The apartment was a disaster. There were boxes everywhere, but not packed boxes, Amazon boxes. Clothes were strewn on the floor. The smell of stale smoke was faint but present. Isabella was sitting on the couch, holding Lily, crying theatrically. Jane, please, Isabella wailed when she saw me. Don't do this. Where will we go? You have a place to go, I said, gesturing to Barbara. Mom's house. I told you I can't have them there, Barbara interjected. My bridge club meets there, there's no room. Then maybe you should pay for her apartment, Mom, I said coldly. Put your name on the lease, put your credit on the line. Barbara fell silent. She stared at the floor. She wouldn't do it. She loved Isabella, but she loved her own comfort more. We're changing the locks back, I told Isabella. And the movers are here to take your things to Mom's house. You are leaving today. I'm not, Isabella screamed. She grabbed a vase, one I had bought her, and threw it at the wall. It shattered. The deputy stepped forward. Ma'am, that's enough. If you destroy property, I will arrest you for criminal mischief. You are currently trespassing on this leaseholder's residence. Isabella looked at the cop, then at Barbara, then at me. She saw the movers waiting. She saw the locksmith drilling the door handle. The reality finally hit her. The bank was closed, the audience had left. You're ruining my life, she hissed at me. No, I said, I'm just taking mine back. Isabella stood up, she grabbed her purse. Come on, Lily, we're going to Grandma's. But Grandma said, Lily started. Get in the car, Isabella snapped. They stormed out. Barbara followed them, shooting me one last look of pure venom. I have no daughter, Barbara muttered as she passed me. I know, I replied to her back. You haven't had one for a long time. The door closed. The apartment was quiet. I looked around at the mess. It would take weeks to clean. It would cost thousands to repair the damages. But as I stood there, breathing in the stale air, I felt my lungs expand fully for the first time since the pneumonia. I could breathe. The fallout was swift. Isabella moved into Barbara's basement. Within a week, the perfect dynamic between them crumbled. Without me as a buffer and a bank, they turned on each other. Barbara called me 2 weeks later, complaining that Isabella was messy, rude, and wouldn't get a job. I listened for 30 seconds, then said, That sounds hard, Mom. Good luck, and hung up. I sold the condo. I cleaned it up, staged it, and put it on the market. The market was hot, and I made a tidy profit, enough to pay back the money I had wasted on Isabella over the years, with plenty left over. I took that money and I booked a trip. Not for me, but for Kyle and me. For his actual birthday celebration, a redo, we went to Universal Studios. We stayed in a nice hotel. We bought the fast passes. We ate whatever we wanted. On our last night there, we were sitting watching the fireworks. Kyle leaned his head on my shoulder. Mom. Yeah, buddy. This was way better than the arcade. I squeezed him tight. I'm glad. Is Isabella still mad? He asked. Probably, I said, but that's not our problem anymore. We have a new rule, remember? Yeah, Kyle smiled. Only people who sing for my cake get to be at the party. Exactly. I looked up at the fireworks exploding in the sky. I had lost a sister and a mother in this fire. It hurt. There were days when I missed the illusion of a family. But then I would look at my bank account, growing instead of shrinking. I would look at my home, peaceful and quiet. I would look at my son, confident and loved. I realized I hadn't lost a family. I had lost a tumor. And for the first time in 40 years, I was finally truly healthy.